Hi, it's Jackie Tantillo, host of Should Have Listened to My Mother podcast. Are you who you are today because of or in spite of your mother? I've come to understand and appreciate the significant role that mothers play in our lives. Not everyone was best suited to become a mom, but by sharing these personal experiences, we come to realize how much we have in common with each other. With over 4 decades of broadcast experience, interviewing iconic musicians, award-winning authors and journalists, entrepreneurs, artists, and more, these personal one-on-one conversations really get to the heart of the matter, to explore the essence of how, who, and why we became who we are today. I can't wait for you to hear this next episode. Welcome back to Should Have Listened to My Mother. We are celebrating March and Women's History Month. My guest, Dr. Dravon James, is a transformational life coach, podcast host, and author. She has practiced in the healthcare field for over 30 years, and her podcast is titled Dr. Dravon James' Everyday Peace. She helps others by using stepping stones to consciously create the life that they want. She coaches people on how to use everything that shows up in their life, things wanted and unwanted, the good and the bad. Her recent book is titled Forgiveness, The Pathway to Happiness. My guest is here to share stories of her relationship with her mother, Ruby, and the impact that Ruby had on her life. Dr. James, welcome to Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Now, I've read a little bit of background about your mom, and I know she's played a pretty significant role in your life. When someone says that to you, are you who you are today because of or in spite of your mom? What kind of visuals or what do you feel in your heart with a statement like that?
Overwhelming gratitude for a debt that I will never be able to repay. And I feel a sense of obligation to be as, I'm going to use the word dogmatic, but I don't mean it in a harsh way, but be as committed to something as my mom was, unwavering.
She was committed in how she raised you or committed in her work. I don't know if she worked, her life, her breath, her being.
My mom was, funny, this will set the stage for my mom. I am a person who loves to laugh and I love comedy and I love jokes and to play games and board games. My mom would always say, I don't play games. I don't find anything funny. So she was, although she herself was quite comical a lot of the times, but her commitment to success, no matter what, the end game is a win, no matter what, and that perhaps shaped my belief in that no matter what shows up in our lives, we're going to use that as a stepping stone to get to where we want to be. And that's how my mom was. She was very, very passionate about education and and about a relationship with a higher power. And that was how she led and how she prioritized her parenting. Everything else was just noise.
She didn't let any of that riffraff get in the way, any of that static.
No, and it was loud. It oftentimes overshadowed, what she was trying to say, but she was always that person. This is where we're going. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter what it feels like. This is where we're going. That's where we ended up.
Interesting. Tell me a little bit about her experience growing up. You grew up in the Southside of Chicago. Is that correct?
Yes. My mom was the oldest of 8 children. Interesting. You hear, and when you watch social media these days, you'll see they talk about the fierceness of the oldest daughter, right? So a little bit of family history. My mom is the oldest child in her family. My grandmother was the oldest child in her family. I am the oldest child in my family, and my daughter is the oldest born to me. And there is something about this legacy of women that it's almost, I would say, when growing up, too much, I say too much heat to handle, too much power to stand, right? Is that no force wavers them. My mother just really had some hard times, um, raising three children on her own, and then moving to Massachusetts because we were ultimately raised in Massachusetts, a little town called Springfield, where we had no family. But she made that choice because she was very, very passionate about education. How you get from Chicago to Springfield, this little town in Massachusetts, and but somewhere in her travels, she must have heard of it, and she said it has a great educational system. That's where we're going. We were little bitty kids
Wow.
and we left everything that we knew, everybody that we knew, and we went to Massachusetts and we were raised there ultimately, but kept going back home to Chicago for the summer times and holidays. But my mom stood oftentimes alone and misunderstood without family or friends. And one of the things that she, I think, put inside of me, consciously and subconsciously, was that you are the tribe all by yourself.
Mm.
You lead and follow.
That
And
sums it up, doesn't it?
yes.
Oh my
So, but
God.
imagine being a small kid and hearing, I couldn't
That,
wrap my head around that. I wanted to go home to where my family was. I wanted
yeah.
um, more material things like every other kid wanted in their lifetime. But she was committed to, she was giving us a better way of life. We left Chicago, moved to Massachusetts, better in so many ways, but very, very lonely,
Yeah. Did she
right?
work?
And
She moved to
when she worked,
Massachusetts to eventually find work, or
she went there without and when we went there, we were very, very
wow.
small. I'm surprised that I even remember the move. That's how young we were, but I do. And and I remember her sending us home to be with her mom for less than a year and us coming back and her just making the decision that, we were going to make it there and we were going to be there. But the lessons when, I think about this show, I should have listened to my mom. And mostly I did listen to my mom. Mostly I did. And for two reasons. One, I was afraid of her.
The
I was really,
intimidation factor.
yeah, I was really afraid to disappoint her because I knew the sacrifices that she was making for us, right?
Yeah.
And, me and my brother and my sister. And as the oldest, she would share a lot of things with me, a lot of her fears, and she would let me see her brokenness inside, her loneliness inside, but her commitment to what she believed was the right way for her children to have a different life than what she had had in Chicago. And I was, I felt indebted to her in a way that hmm, made me not want to disappoint her, although I did many, many times.
Like
I was a
as the
kid like any other
oldest,
kid.
as the oldest,
Yeah.
you kind of co-parent, right? She had to confide and open up sometimes. Did she really confide in you? I mean, she must have held a lot inside as a single
Oh my,
parent.
yeah. You don't know
That's the
how much your mom,
hardest. Yeah, that's
yeah,
the
you don't know how
hard.
much your mom holds inside. We lost my mom a few years back. And when you start going through her things,
Mm,
and you realize, oh, I never knew that. I never. So you think you know everything about your mom, but you really don't. But she did confide in me about her loneliness. And interestingly enough, when we all grew up and left for college, she did return back to Chicago. She missed it that much and missed her family. So she did go home. But she did confide in me the loneliness, the struggle, being without any support network. She had none. So it was just her and her three kids who probably were closer than the average mom and daughter.
oh, I bet. And speaking about her in interviews, and her spirituality was one of the things that really kept her on the straight and narrow, kept her in a pointed in a certain direction. The best for her children was what the direction she obviously cleared that path for.
Yeah, very interesting story that I love to tell that has shaped my life is that when I was little, we went to church all day on Saturday and all day on Sunday, two very different churches. We went to a metaphysical church, a New Age, people call it, and we went to a Pentecostal church. And my mother would tell us on Saturday, do not mention to these people that we go to a Pentecostal church. They would never understand. And then we would go to Pentecostal church, and she would say, "Do not mention to these people that we go to a metaphysical church." They would never understand. But as a small person listening to these two messages, and you could not fall asleep, she made you stay awake. And they sound very similar to me. They were using different words, of course, but they sound very similar to me. And I know for a fact it shaped the person that I am today. One, very open-minded when it comes to religion, but very much relying on a higher power, but not to the point where my beliefs don't impose on other people. I just accept people as they are. And I think I got that open-mindedness from going to what my mother thought were two um, absolutely different ends of the world churches, but they weren't in my mind. I could
Mm.
hear the similarities in the messages. And to this day, I think I still practice. I don't go to two different churches, but I read a lot, and my faith grounds a lot of my decisions and is my North Star for just about everything that I do. Although um, you probably won't necessarily hear it when you read my reading openly discuss faith, but it is always the undercurrent in that there is something higher than me that keeps the moon and the stars in place.
Yeah, I'm with you. If I didn't have my spirituality or my however belief in a higher power, it would be very hard. I mean, we grew up as, seven kids, Italian American family, Catholic church. My mom would go to mass every day. We would say the rosaries with her, in the front hall on our hands and knees on holy days. I mean, but she had a very different perspective, and she helped us understand um, that there's a spectrum within a, a religion, and to our hearts, she said, it's important for you to grab onto what feels best for you. If something is too conservative or too rigid or too liberal, you have to figure out what you want in between.
Yeah, yeah. And understand that this is all about love. And that's the thing that my mother really imparted on me, that no matter what you do, no matter what you say or where you go, the basis of that has got to be love, even in anger, even when you have hard conversations and you have to make challenging decisions. It comes down to this is the most loving thing to do, and here's why, right? And that's difficult. Now as a mom of a 24-year-old and a 22-year-old, I sometimes get to have those conversations, although rare, where my children come back to me and say, "Hey, mom, I remember you saying this. And I remember at the time, it sounded like the worst thing in the world, and you were the worst mom in the world." And my daughter says to me sometimes, "But I can remember you saying that this is love. I know it doesn't feel like it,
Well, that's
but this is
wonderful.
love."
That's a great a conversation to have with your daughter. That's wonderful for them
Yeah,
to recognize that.
yeah,
Because often we have our mom on a pedestal as a child. It's mom, right? She's the beginning, middle, and end. Hopefully, over the 6 years that I've been hosting this show, I have learned horrendous things of children's experience. And yet, the adult grows up to be a pretty remarkable person using their experience as a gift, as what not to be, right? That's pretty great if you can turn your life around. Use it as to my husband is a great example of that, of what how to be a good father, not in the role his dad played in his own life, but he just turned it around. He was great. He is great. He's a great dad. When you think of your mom and you smile, what do you see her doing? Did she love music? Did she dance around the house? Did she like to cook big meals and have fun? What made her happy?
First of all, my mother read the Bible from cover to
Oh.
cover. I don't know how many times in my lifetime. So I was saying studying the Word of God made her happy, but she was, to many people of her time, an enigma because my mother would win dance contests. In Chicago, there's a dance style called stepping, which is still a thing today. People still do this dance. My mom would win contests And oh my gosh, she was a great dancer. She loved music. And it makes me smile. My sister had the renewing of her vows many, many years ago. And my mom, just gorgeous, at that renewal ceremony, they played music, and my mother teaching people how to step because she was just that good, still just that good.
So
So
what kind
it
of
made me smile.
music or what era of music are we talking about with the step?
Oh, so stepping is still today. I mean, young people now are still
Contemporary
stepping.
and mhm.
Yeah, it's timeless in Chicago. But I mean, I think she could step off of anything, R&B,
Oh, good.
classical soul music. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. When you think of her, this is a story of a woman who, in reference to your mom.
Oh, this is a story of a woman who persevered. This is against all odds, persevered. This is a woman who carried a lot on her shoulders. I will say pride, would not ask for help.
But that can get in the way sometimes, can it?
Excuse me, she wouldn't ask for help.
Mm,
Um,
it's hard.
she was principled, and she was the quintessential lady at all times. At all times. When her heart was breaking, you could never tell. She was always on the outside put together. The words that came out of her mouth were always poised and graceful. And it hurt to hear her, as the oldest, crying at night or confiding in me that she really didn't know what the next step was going to be. And she really did need me to be more adultish and not be in a child state for as long as I let my children be in children's states because things were hard for her. And she needed me to take on more responsibility, to not have so many childish needs and wants, to let go of those things, to be
That's
more supportive. And I would never, I hear people say all the time, oh, I was like a second parent. I won't say that I was a second parent. My mother was wholeheartedly the parent. There was no question about that. Her authority was strong, but she didn't have a lot of extra time to coddle.
mm.
You needed to
You're
get
the
the
you're the oldest
instructions.
of how many children?
I'm the oldest of three.
Right.
So you need to get the instructions that she was giving you quickly that were not going to be met. You need to be able to understand that these are the necessities in life. They are provided for you, and everything else may not be there. And and that's hard as a child to have that. Um, but she was a principled woman, and her methods were probably not tried by many, right? She didn't have a support network to say, hey, Ruby, you're doing it right, or hey, Ruby, that's a little too stern. She relied on her own sensibility and her own inner guide to say, this is how I'm going to get us from point A to point B. This is how I'm going to get all three of my children advanced degrees, educated, and so she
Yeah.
was a very stern woman, but always in love. And she did laugh. She would always say to me, I don't like jokes and I don't like laugh. But she laughed all of the time. She just really wanted us to be serious minded about the goal, never lose sight of the goal. And the
Right.
goal
She
for
was
my mom,
definitely focused. She was
yeah,
focused, right? Everything had to kind of work like a train to make sure it all happened. So you were her confidant, perhaps.
yeah. And it's so interesting because, I raised my children in the era where children could ask a lot of questions. And my mom visited one year and she said, your children, she said, they talk a little bit too much. They were little. And I said, Mom, she said, that will backfire. Sometimes you
Oh.
need a child just to do what a child is told to do. I said, Mom, times have changed. She goes, well, they really haven't.
Do you think they have?
I think there was a lot of wisdom in that. I didn't follow that advice, but I think there was a lot of wisdom in that. And I tell my kids the story and they just laugh. I wanted to go to school to study theater. And I had been written up in a citywide paper. This is going to be oh, this actress is amazing. And my mother read that article and she said, well, that's not going to happen. You're going to go to school, you're going to get a doctorate degree, and that's the end of that.
Which you did. Well, actually, you did
Yeah.
both because you're in the Wire, so you did some acting, and you did become a doctor. So, did you ever
Right.
hear her talking to anyone about like what her aspirations for you were, other than going to become a doctor and all that? Did you ever overhear her in conversation with anyone and either be encouraged by what she was saying, whether in a whisper or not, or just completely devastated as though you had disappointed her?
Who she wanted to be or who she wanted me to be?
Who she wanted you to be?
No, she was I didn't have to hear it in a whisper. Funny story. This is a true story. My mom wanted me to go to medical school. And of course, we were not rich people. And one day a recruiter came to my high school and told me about pharmacy school. And I said, well, he said, don't worry, you'll get a pharmacy degree. You'll be able to get a good job while you study for the MCATs. Remember, I wanted to be an actress, but I was very good in math and science. And my mom had just decided that the person, I don't know, maybe she talked to my counselor, you'd be a very good medical doctor. That's what you're going to do. So I went to pharmacy school only she let me go there because I was pharmacy pre-med. When I graduated, she told everybody, well, she's getting ready to go to medical school. And we were at this dinner and she says, what's the next steps? I said, we'll talk about it afterwards. And when we got home, I said, Mom, I'm going to practice pharmacy. I'm not going to go to medical school. She said, that'll never do. She said, that will never do. She said, I've told everybody you're going to be a doctor. I want you to be a doctor. That's the end of that. And I said, well, Mom, I want to pursue some other things. Long story short, I never went to medical school, but that little bit did disappoint her. It did disappoint her. And then I went back and got my doctorate degree in pharmacy, and she insisted that I refer to myself as doctor before. So out of respect for my mom, I do that.
Doctor. And I love Dravon. That's a beautiful name. Does that
So
have a
thank you.
history to it, or
No,
is
it's
it
actually my
biblical?
middle.
I've never heard biblical, but or family, generational. It's really
I always
pretty.
ask my mom. It's actually my middle name is Dravon. But I always ask my mom, I say, how did you come up with these names? She goes, I had 9 months to think of names. That's what I did.
Oh, some people think of it for years. The name, if I ever when I have my baby. Oh my goodness, Ruby's pretty special. Did you
Yes,
ever
she was a bit.
put your hands on your hips and stamp your foot and said, I'm not listening to you?
No, I remember there was a phrase, and probably some of your listeners have heard this phrase. My mother had a phrase, and if she used it, you didn't want to hear it twice. Don't suck in air when you look at me, young lady.
Wow, I've
And
never heard that.
that would be the end of that, right? So that was like if you took a deep breath as though you were getting ready to, mm-mm, yeah. So rebellion, my little act of rebellion, I had graduated from high school. I stayed out all night. I'm getting ready to leave for college in a couple weeks. And I got home at like maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. My mother was standing on the front porch waiting home,
No.
right? And she said to my friends, this will be the last time you see her this summer.
Oh boy. That's a
That
lot.
was the household that Ruby ran.
The house that Ruby built.
Yes. But looking back, and oh my gosh, did parents are, she had to get on the phone and call all our friends and tell all our friends what I did and all that kind of stuff. And I was so mad. But I look back on that and I said, boy, she saved me from probably so many different things.
Yeah. Hindsight is 2020,
Yeah.
so they say. So in the last couple of minutes that we have, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. But I do want to talk more about your podcast and your book. And I have all the social media information for everybody too. So your book is entitled Forgiveness, The Pathway to Happiness. Tell us how you came up with that title and why.
Well, gosh, that's interesting. We're talking about my mom and forgiveness, and you mentioned your husband, and he learned what not to do. One of the things that I learned from my mom was the importance of forgiveness, and it was one of the things that she struggled with having such a hard life, is people who you really love and trust breaking your heart and disappointing you. And as I grew in my own journey, I watched that, and I was a person who was always easy to forgive. Almost clown-like forgiveness, but I was really doing it wrong. And I realized that I too was suffering from unforgiveness. I was in a place where I was unforgiving of me. So I would take, if someone did something wrong, I'd take all the blame and internalize it. It had to be me, some kind of way I've done something that caused this. And I just started with the passing of my mom, started reevaluating, her life, the parts that I understood, in my life, the parts that were mirroring her life and the parts that were so different. And I saw this need to really understand and work through forgiveness. And as a life coach, I work through it with many of my clients. And, they say you teach that what you need to learn. So I started doing a lot of research for years. I was researching it. And then when my mom passed, I said, okay, it's time to get serious on this. And so that's where I got that. And I realized that what we all know is this: forgiveness is like pushing that boulder up a hill forever. Unforgiveness is anyway, and never getting a break. Once you forgive, you let that go and you feel like, oh my gosh,
The weight of the world is
my,
off your shoulders, right?
I So, unforgiveness is like pushing that boulder up the hill, which is so challenging. And, and the more you don't forgive, the heavier it gets and the harder it gets. Once we decide to forgive, it's like, poof, it becomes like a cotton ball and it's not there anymore. And it's this huge weight off of us. It gives us energy to be creative, to do other things. It leads us to our happy place.
It
So
does.
I wrote this book for people to get freedom from that, to be free of that boulder, of that heaviness, and find that happiness that's promised to them.
It also has a lot to do forgiveness and self-love. I think it is kind of connected because
Yes,
I
it is.
often will, I didn't do this right, or I should have done this way, or it's always something that I'm hanging on to, and it's that self-love that can set you free as well. So I love that part of it.
Yeah,
And I know you're
probably
a big,
that's so
go ahead.
nicely said. Forgiveness is probably one of the most self-loving things we could do, right?
Yeah. And your new book, Forgiveness, Pathway to Happiness, and your podcast is called Dr. Dravon James Everyday Peace. We can find you, everyone can find you on social media, on Instagram at Everyday Peace. You're also on Facebook, and on Twitter, it's Dr. Dravon James, and LinkedIn, Dr. Dravon James. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing stories of Ruby. I know there's
Thank
a quote of Socrates that I've heard you use before in an interview. And to know thyself is the beginning of wisdom. So I've been trying to keep that in my head and heart,
you.
to put my head and my heart in a good place.
Oh, yes. Oh, I like the way you say it like that. Yeah, to know thyself is the beginning of wisdom, Socrates, and it is so true. It's so true. It's all inside of us, isn't it?
Yeah, we just got to learn that before this episode of our life is sends us up to the next plane.
Yeah, we got to be courageous because a lot of times we're afraid to look within. It's almost like that line from Planet of the Apes. What will he find out there, right? It's, what will we find in there? We're so afraid. If we look in there, we'll find some love that has been untapped,
Yeah,
unmined.
got to start digging.
Hmm.
Dr. Dravon James, thank you so, so much for joining us on Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother.